This is the third part of a presentation on the Frugal fifth generation combat aircraft. There are two before this, and the references for those on YouTube are given at the end of this presentation. Before I begin this, I'll just clarify a few things. This is a discussion by an Indian engineer enthusiast for largely Indian audiences. However, all are welcome. All the remarks and contexts are made with the Indian scenario in mind. So if you find some reference, I'm alluding to something which you cannot follow, it's probably because it's an Indian situation. The statements I have made here are all from open source and after considerable research and careful cross checking. And I am also aware that each point that I raise here is going to raise more questions. So I'm not making any claims as to uh, completeness. What did we say earlier in the parts 1 and 2? Well, what we said was that specifications are often a cut and paste job worldwide. And there's a great deal of copying from each other because finally setting the specifications is a very is something you might as well consult an astrologer. I mean the process is as chaotic as that sometimes. And therefore, if we can get the specifications right, we can reduce the cost of defense quite a lot. The second we said is there is an economics in warfare, what they call the frontier arithmetic. You must kill your enemy at the lowest possible cost. There is also a limit to the amount of technology one can put into a role. There appears to be a technology boundary layer which begins to be shed. That means, why was there not a Dakota replacement? Because the Dakota was ideally suited for its role. I mean, if you could somehow get those piston engines to run on jet fuel and have the same life as a turbine engine, I'm sure the Dakota would be in production even today. I mean, that's a controversial statement, but you get the point what I'm trying to say. That means be careful with technology. You can waste it. Then cherry picking of specifications must be enforced. You cannot have just because everyone has 7 features in the 5th generation, yours must also have 7 features. And the new paradigm of warfare is that with artificially intelligent weapons replacing dumb ones, the need to be at the other chap's 6 o'clock no longer exists. So there can be a great reduction in your platform performance. Now, having summarized what we had said earlier, though I suggest you do have a look at those YouTube presentations, what are you going to discuss now? Well, as it says, what should be the Indian 5th generation? The Indian 5th generation doesn't have to be identical to the Americans because the needs are completely different and we can have a much cheaper 5th generation. What will be the technical advantages of a frugal 5th generation? In a short, it is the difference between doing something doable and attempting something that is at present out of our reach. If not for very great reason, but at the moment it is out of our reach. Now, what is the chance a cherry-picked 5th generation will have? A plan of development, expected costs, and expected time scales. Now, again, I would repeat that what I am saying will generate 100 questions. So I'm not saying this is what I'm saying is complete or cannot be discussed further. Let me now define what I mean by a fifth generation. By a full fifth generation, this kind of thing the Chinese and the Americans have apparently done is full fourth generation plus stealth, sensor fusion, super cruise, high Mach capability. By high Mach, I mean relatively Mach 1.6, network centric warfare. The full fifth generation is a very expensive solution. I mean, to develop, to build, and to maintain. Yes, I mean, having already built 1,000 F-35s, they would have brought the costs down because the Americans are excellent at production. But it's still an expensive aeroplane, and there is a cheaper way of doing it. That's what I believe. Now, stealth is a must have feature. There can be no negotiations on that. Similarly, sensor fusion, networking of information, data processing, fortunately, an area where we are quite good and I would say excellent is there. But super cruise Mach capabilities are cost pushers, and I say it's illogical in the era of AI weapons. Yes, if you have the capability to have both, well and good. But if you don't, you can get it. The writing on the wall. Now I know I am sounding like an old Cassandra, full of gloom and doom. But the fact is, again, this is entirely from my own assessment as an outsider. There may be a secret development stations where they have got all that, but my assessment is that we don't have that engine required for Super Cruise. We do not have the stealth technology. Yes, computer simulations and all that, but the hard, the old Roman saying, an ounce of action is worth a pound of words. You change the nouns. Theoretical studies are very good, but you want practical thing, and we don't have practical stealth. Now, the choices we face today, therefore, is something of a stopgap, a third best solution, not even a second best solution. Either that or you get nothing, because the way the structure is done is that is the thing that is halting development, not the lack of resource and whatever. We can do wonders, but the present setup can't do that. There is no shop knowledge, no old wives' tales, no superstition, and no practice. There is a fallacy that you need PhDs to design an aircraft. The actual amount of knowledge required is a very slender structure. B.Tech level would probably do. But that has to be buttressed by shop knowledge and aviation load. So, various kinds of buttresses all around, superstition, old wives' tales, what are the industrial practices, and all that supposed. The real hard technical knowledge is really not that very much. Funds and technology are not core issues. These are schoolboy excuses that are trotted out whenever a project has gone completely out of control. So, what is our fifth generation problem? A counter to the fifth generation intruders of the others. I mean, God forbid if we have to go and fight the F-35s and J-30s or 20s or whatever the Chinese have got up, then we must have something to deal with that. We have no plans to go and bomb them. And don't give me that old thing, offense is the best means of defense. Yes, I know that, but you can't afford it. So what will you do? Now, a full fifth generation warplane is an expeditionary warplane and needs to carry much of its capabilities within itself. So it's a large and expensive aeroplane which often is working cross purposes to the relevant technology of stealth. Now, given our war aims, the Indian fifth generation need to be a sniper to counter hostile fifth generation. An Indian fifth generation, being essentially a defensive one, can carry part of its capability via ground based interception systems. The thing I have in mind is the way the MiG 17s, it didn't have a search radar, but the Vietnamese had it on the ground. So the data was fed to them, and the MiG 17s were intercepting incoming raids quite effectively, apparently. This is a very old graph you can see from the smudges on it that I had drawn long ago. And what I'm trying to point out is this actually plots the various generation over the parameters. The bottom x-axis gives the aircraft design Mach number. The upper x-axis gives the range of missiles in kilometers, and the y-axis is the aircraft design ceiling. Now the innermost rhombus, which is in blue if you have eyes of a lynx, now that has is the first generation. It gives this altitude, this speed, and so on and so forth. The next one, which is in red, is the second generation. The outermost is the third generation. And then the inner one in green is the fourth generation. Now, this is actually showing the point I'm driving, that the introduction of smart weapons has already caused the performance envelope to shrink. Now, if we can do that with smart weapons, imagine what we can do with artificial intelligence. And for us, our salvation lies in concentrating on this point. Otherwise, we'll be barking up the wrong tree and getting frustrated. But the most interesting is that little thing just nestling between the first generation and the second generation. That means 98% of all your combat so far has occurred there. And just imagine, people want that right hand corner, topmost upper corner, that fourth generation or third generation performance plus stealth. Of course you can do it, but the way supersonics, well, if you'll excuse the word, bugger, the performance is amazing. No engineer should stand it, especially now with artificial intelligence weapons. Okay? So my point is that if we can get rid of this obsession with Mach 2 and Mach 1.6, we have a politically stable possibility of it in us. So what am I saying? I'm saying we need stealth, we need data processing, and we need a subsonic platform, and so forth. Now, I'm giving some basic stealth considerations. The radar return is a function of the inverse function of the fourth power of the range. It works both ways. That means the further you are, the more difficult you are to detect. The closer you are, equally difficult to avoid detection. Perfect stealth, that means all around, Mr. Invisible Man, is very difficult. Size does matter. I mean, they will tell you dipoles, this, that, yes and no, but size does matter. I mean, yes, you can have dipole effect, and a small 4 centimeter wire will give a strong resolution as a Boeing 747. I mean, that's what they will tell you, but size does matter, which is why the Nat and the Northrop F5 were difficult to distinguish. Shape also matters. The Avro Vulcan reportedly had a very small signature. Stealth is a substitute for platform performance. In fact, my entire argument is hammering on that point. And I believe, now I'm willing to change my opinion, that faceted stealth, that is the stuff they had on the F-117, is inherently more robust than RAM reliant or, Ufimtsev equation type of stealth. So having sort of given a very thumbnail sketch of the what a fifth generation this thing is all about, an Indian sniper fifth generation, the what should be the conceptual specifications? Not a pound for the ground. The old F-16 fighter mafia slogan comes back here. It's needed. Not a pound for the ground. Speed performance will be transonic. Transonic, I mean, if we get some supersonic performance, which I expect we will, that's just unintended. Much of the detection of the hostile stealth aircraft will be off-board via manned observers post. Let me explain here, you see. During the Battle of Britain, once the German bombers had crossed the chain home radar line, the radar couldn't see backwards. So the British had manual people with binoculars and big earphones. Well, I mean, very complicated looking stuff, but essentially earphones to listen and to report. And that would be plotted and the information extracted. My thing is that if we have, I believe there's some work going on that, but you don't even need a full manned station. Think in terms of a fully automatic radar station with its own generator and whatnot, somehow detecting and reporting the presence, and that can be plotted. But why? Because the kind of radar that can detect stealth cannot precisely locate it. Yeah, the onboard equipment, on the other hand, should be sufficient to detect passively, if possible, a marauding fifth generation at ranges of BVR missiles and to engage in a dogfight. Oh, I forgot to mention in that graph that I had drawn that this business of BVR standing off at and shooting you down 180 kilometers away is one of the biggest hoaxes of advertising. Yes, of course you can. If you are heading towards each other at supersonic speed, at the say 15,000 meters altitude, I don't know what you're going to doing there. Then yes, you can get him. But down below, the BVR range is only in the range of 10 or 15 kilometers, almost WVR. So better remember that. Now, the aircraft, I think, should have 2 BVR missiles, 2 close combat missiles, and a cannon armament. And you know that HF-24, it had a flak fueling arrangement, which to me at the present is a pipe dream. I don't know if we can get it onto the design, but if we can, because it's, that Ford arranged in that flak fueling has a very large lethal density of fire. I'll come to that later. No provision for external weaponry. The fifth generation is a special tool. You don't want to load it with iron bombs and try and help the infantry out for that. For that you design something like a state-of-the-art A-10. But not fifth generation stuff. I don't know why people, this is the problem with specifications. Highly expensive aeroplane being used for. That's why the Afghans have always managed to see off people. Because they don't have technology, they innovate, and high technology anyway cannot be poured into peculiar situations.